Hello, Radio Maria Canada. Here in the city of Toronto, we have with us Father Stephen from the Diocese of Peterborough. And so I'm going to let us go and let us speak about priesthood. Father Stephen, you know your patron saint spoke against the temple. Remember?
Yes,
And he
yeah.
got killed because he spoke against the temple. You know, at that time, Christianity was divided between the Hellenists that somehow followed Jesus uh, against the ones more close to Judaism, like Peter and John. They were still going to the temple, although Jesus was somehow against the temple. And the Hellenists, and the first persecution of Jerusalem, and the Hellenists got persecuted. And even say the Acts of the Apostles says that the apostles remained, so they were not persecuted. So you are from the Diocese of Peterborough, and I'm going to be tough with you. Well, I'm a
Okay.
priest like you for 39 years, but I'm also a religious priest. I belong to the Consolata Missionaries. And I am three things. So it's like a Trinitarian vocation. And the first for me, it's the most important thing is the mission. That's the first thing. The second, religious life. And the third would be the priesthood. So how do you see a priest in modern life? I will have other questions to help, because it's a vocation. It looks like it is in crisis. For you to give you an example, my parish priest has five villages. Let us say 50 years ago, each of these five villages had a priest. Now is a priest for five villages. And that's Europe, that's Portugal. And wherever you go, here looks like there is lots of clergy, but it's imported clergy. It's not local clergy. So how do you see this crisis?
Yeah, I think the one thing to kind of keep in mind, because I study a lot of history in the seminary, and I like reading
Yeah,
into history. And
sure.
one thing we have to kind of, two extremes to avoid. One, to avoid, to stop thinking that the past was terrible. We hate the past. The other extreme is to think that the past was wonderful. Like, look at all these priests we had back in the day. Look at each village had its own priest. Now it's every five villages with one priest. And not to say that nowadays that there are no issues. Of course there are. You just have to like turn on the news and see that. But I think one thing we have to also kind of keep in mind that but ever since the fall of Adam and Eve, we've always been in crisis. There's always been sinfulness in the world. And even if you look at like the crisis in the medieval times, they had conflicts between the church and the state, the investiture controversy, like who has the right to appoint bishops, and that was quite the controversy in those days. And but that's the past. This is now. I think we wanted to not fall into the trap of thinking the past was perfect because of this, because they had to deal with their own crisis back then.
Sure.
But we are dealing with kind of a numbers crisis. We have to import clergy from overseas. If I look at my home diocese of Peterborough, like I'm local to the diocese. I was born and raised in Peterborough and became a priest there. Most of our clergy are from outside the diocese. Like, many of them are from outside the country, outside the continent. Yeah, they're from a lot from India, a lot from Philippines, a lot from Nigeria.
I knew the Angelis. 20
Oh,
years ago.
yes.
He was a friend of mine. Yeah, the
For
Angelis.
sure, yes.
Yeah.
Bishop De Angelis, God rest his soul. He was a Bishop of Peterborough for 12, 13 years.
Oh.
Yeah, so he is a wonderful. I knew him. He was the one that actually accepted me into the seminary.
Okay, you see.
Believe it or not, so I knew him fairly well. A very, very nice man. He was a missionary and a religious as well.
He wanted, at that time, to take me to Peterborough. But
Oh,
of course
okay.
I couldn't go.
So when I look back at my own like story in Peterborough, I was actually from a parish that was run by religious who are from from Poland, Polish Franciscans.
Polish Franciscans.
Yes, they're no longer in the diocese because of shrinking numbers. He had to kind of be moved elsewhere. But we do have to have import clergy. And one thing we have to remember is that, despite them being from overseas, they're still priests. They're still human beings, and they bring a perspective that's different from North American life. Yeah, without foreign clergy, my diocese will be really strapped for priests. Yeah, it's even some of our Canadian-born clergy are not from the Peterborough area. There are a few from like Toronto or Ottawa, and they just happen to come to Peterborough. So it's but it is a challenge when it comes to promoting vocations. So for those who don't know, I'm the director of vocations for the diocese. I'm also director of youth ministry, and when it comes to promoting vocations, you have to kind of avoid comparing ourselves to Toronto, which has like all these guys in the seminary. Whereas we have 2 seminarians, and I'm working on a third.
But your seminarians come to Toronto.
They come to Toronto, yes.
They
Yeah,
study
St.
here.
Augustine's. Yeah, they study here. As did I as well.
Did you have any ordinations this year?
We have 2 ordinations coming up. We have Mr. Deacon Edmund Monroe Scott, who's going to be ordained to the priesthood at the end of May. He's a convert from the Anglican Church. He was an Anglican priest, so because of this pastoral provision, or it's a version of it by St. John Paul II, he's been ordained a priest for the Peterborough Diocese. And we're also preparing for a transitional diaconal ordination on May 15th of Mr. Peter Bissonnette. That will be happening in St. Michael's Parish in Coburg, 1 p.m., June 15th. And then the priest ordinations happen on May 31st at 7 p.m., Cathedral of St. Peter in Chains in Peterborough. So and we have one other fellow in the seminary, and he's going into third-year theology.
Okay, so how many years of theology do you study?
It's typically... Yeah, how do you... 4 academic years, first, second, third, and 4-year theology. There's a year of pastoral internship. So while we're preparing for ordination, we spend a year in a parish under the direction of a pastor. And you do so in your home diocese. Like Toronto guys who go to a Toronto Archdiocese parish, Hamilton go to a Hamilton parish, Peterborough to a Peterborough parish, Peterborough diocese, because my diocese is huge. It's a massive diocese. So when I went on internship in 2015, 2016, I was sent to St. Joseph's Parish in Bowmanville, which is about a 15-minute drive east of Oshawa. Yeah, and we do that. Then there's a spiritual year, or a pastoral year. Oh, sorry, not a pastoral year, but a propedeutic year. I did that as well. That's at St. Augustine's itself. And also, how much philosophy you take will depend on the candidate. I did 3 years of philosophy.
Oh, and 3 years of theology.
4 years of theology.
4 years
plus
of theology.
2 years, 1 year of spiritual year and 1 year of internship. So in total, that was about... 7, 8. Well, it depends how you look at it. Like when I was studying, I was doing my undergrad in philosophy, so that's considered a college level seminary. So in terms of major seminary, which the seminary that provides you more direct formation for the priesthood, I was started at spiritual year, so that would have been 6 years. But I had a year of discernment with my diocese before that.
So what I was saying is, and I would like your opinion on the future of the church. Sometimes I say, I use this expression many times. We the priests, we are an endangered species. Endangered species meaning that, like species, they disappear. But of course, priesthood will never disappear. But it might change. It might change shape, and in my changing, as a missionary. And also the sister was speaking like there is a mission and there are 20 chapels. Now, what the Eucharist is more important than the priest. It's the Eucharist that makes the priest, not the priest that makes the Eucharist. As a matter of fact, you can be a holy priest and a bad priest, but the Eucharist is still the same.
For sure.
So, Christians have the right to the Eucharist, to celebrate the memory of Jesus. And there are many Christian communities that they don't have a priest to celebrate the Eucharist. I can tell you, the Catholic Church has been in Ethiopia, where I was as a missionary, right from the beginning, even right from the times of that eunuch. So the church was there. And yet, we are 0.5 of the population. And the Protestants are 2.5 of the population. Of course, the rest, they are Muslims and Coptic, Orthodox Coptic. But why the Protestants multiply so easily and we don't? Because we have communities, we establish communities, but then we don't have pastors for those communities. As a matter of fact, in the missions, the catechist becomes like the pastor because he does funerals, he does baptisms because it's in urgency, he does baptism because we are too far away, we are not there. So this brought me to the early times of the church, presbyteroi, the elders. You know, at that time, and we have just read today in this reading, the first reading, Paul is saying goodbye to the Christians of Ephesus, and he's called the elders. He never says elder. Each community has more than one. And that reminds me of the Orthodox priesthood, which is in Ethiopia, in the Coptic church, you don't have a priest celebrating the Eucharist. You have 3 or 4 or 5. So elders, not elder. So it's like the priesthood is diluted in different persons, not concentrated in just one. And so the elders, and he called the elders and he gives them advice and before he goes away. So Paul and the other apostles, they go here and there, they found communities. And then if there is a community, there has to be elders. The elders that are the most mature psychologically, I believe, and the most holy. Those that there is even a list of things that they should be, as St. Paul described them. But so if there is a Christian community, there are elders that spring up from that community to that community. What we have after that the first times, we have Constantine Church. We have a church that becomes a power, and we have the priesthood that becomes clergy, the priesthood that becomes like a blue blood, like that in the Middle Ages even becomes a caste, a class, the clergy, the nobles, and the people. And that's the priesthood we are still having. For how long can we have that sort of priesthood? Shouldn't we, or won't we be forced to go back to the priesthood of the early churches? That's my question.
Yeah, that's a very good question, a very interesting topic to discuss. It brings up this idea of the priest and his personality, and because when you encounter a priest, he's a human being, although he's ordained, has divine powers. He still has a personality,
Sure.
and sometimes we can see happen, intentionally or not, is that community is centered around a particular priest and his personality. He's a people person. He's very popular. He's a good homilist, and visits the people and all these things. And you see when we change pastors, all of a sudden, like, the dynamics change, and
the people follow
him. Yeah, I've seen it happen a lot of times in different dioceses and all over.
Well, that used to be more Protestant-like. That's for me, I am very much against it, because you are using the gospel to become, because the gospel is the most beautiful narrative of all times. Then you are using that narrative that captivates people, but you captivate people not for the gospel, but for yourself. And you see that, and some for money. We see that in Protestant churches.
Of course,
we are starting to see that even in the Catholic Church.
Exactly, yeah. And I think we need to rediscover the theology of the priesthood, or the vow of the priesthood, that despite who the man is personally, he still acts as alter Christus, as the other Christ. And you may not like a particular priest as a person for his personality, but he's still celebrating the Eucharist at the altar. Sure. He's providing you Christ. We go to him for confession. He's absolving your sins just as much as Padre Pio would. Like, there's a story. Someone was waiting in line Padre Pio's confessional.
Confession.
And then Padre had to like cut off the line. And as he was leaving, a man said, "Oh, sorry, Father, can you hear my confession?" And Padre Pio was like, "Just go to Father so-and-so. It's the same thing." Yeah, it's the same sacrament, it's the same thing.
True.
You might be a little more disposed with one guy, but it's still the same sacrament. We need to rediscover that objectivity when it comes to the priesthood. Subjectivity is an important matter because they taught us in seminary you have to be bridges for Christ, not obstacles. The priest should refine his personality and personal traits in such a way that he doesn't repel people, like if he's not mean or he can like preach somewhat coherently. But in the end of the day, we still need to rediscover the fact that regardless of Father Jim, Father Bob, Father Steve, Father Gary, it's all the same Father priesthood. It's still the same priesthood, and we should rediscover that fact that we go to Mass not because of the priest, but because of Jesus, because of the sacraments. Yeah, like I get it. There could be reasons to move from one parish to another, legitimate and that, but for the most part, we should not be doing that. We should still realize that our parish is our home, and we go there for Christ. We don't go there for the priests. And I heard this from lay people when various scandals come up, in the news and all that, and they say, I don't go to church for the priest. I go to the priest for Jesus. That's good. It. Yeah. Not to minimize the scandals, but to remind us that we don't go to Mass for the people, and that includes the people in the congregation as well.
But look at the 12.
Look at the 12. Yes.
Were they saints?
Yeah.
Starting with Peter. Oh.
Yeah. Peter denied our Lord not once, not twice, but 3 times he denied. Yeah.
And the other delivered them. So.
Pretty much, yes, yeah. It's but yet they became great saints despite their faults and their shortcomings.
Okay, so now, of course, the personal question, which is for me. At the age of 6, I wanted to be what I am now. So I'm not an example to anybody, especially for modern times. You don't. At my time, there were minor seminaries, so you grew up, which we gave up the minor seminaries. I just don't want your opinion on this, but we gave up the minor seminaries. But the football schools, they haven't. The football schools, and I know some football schools in Portugal and the whole Europe. The football, you learn it in school. So the clubs, the big clubs, they have a school. They have a primary school and an elementary school and a high school. And it's like a college. You go there and you live there. And you play soccer every day. Every day you play. And so the very same school that you have outside is that the one. And sometimes you visit your family, but you are there just for football. And of course you learn all the subjects like any kid outside. So you see, these clubs, they believe in Ronaldo was born in one of those schools. Messi comes from one of those schools. They were born into football at very early. And they were playing football every day. And they were plus studying the old subjects like everybody else. So why did we stop doing that with minor seminaries? Why did we?
Yeah, I'm really not too sure about that, and I don't know what the situation was in Europe for I guess there were a lot of them, and I know in countries like Nigeria they still have them, and
they still have them.
And there's one in Canada in British Columbia run by the Benedictines. Yeah, it's on the West Coast, but for the most part, I don't think there are too many minor seminaries around. I know of one in the United States, maybe 2, but. In general, boarding schools. This is my opinion. In general, boarding schools in Canada don't work out very well. They're fairly expensive, and I don't think kids like to go to boarding schools. I think there are some, but I'm not sure. We have 0 boarding schools in Peterborough, absolutely none. And
seminary would be like a boarding
something
school.
Like that. Yeah. So I'm familiar with these minor seminaries, and for those who are listening, I don't know what it is. We're talking about these basically boarding schools for boys. That boys would go there, and they're considered seminaries because they're preparing them for priesthood.
Yeah, sure.
But it was done in such a way that they weren't started their major formation. They were the minor seminary. So they're basically receiving a good Christian formation and a good Christian spirituality. And it basically was served as establishing the building blocks of Christian life, which hopefully inspired them to the priesthood.
Yeah, even at my time, the only condition that you can be here is that you don't exclude the vocation to the priesthood and to missionary life, because I was a missionary seminary. So as long as you don't exclude that, you can be here. It's not that you are already sure at the age of 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Oh, for sure. Very few people are sure at that age. Even if they are young and you think of priesthood, they're still not quite sure exactly,
true.
like myself.
But that was the idea. If you exclude it, then live and go ahead with your life.
For sure, yeah.
But if you still include it, then you can be here. And the latest years, we were going to a normal high school. We were only living in the seminary, but the school, most of the day we were in this normal high school with other kids. But anyway, that's not your case. That's something probably of the past. Although, as I say, the big soccer clubs, they still believe in it, and they observe it. They have those schools. They don't give them up. But anyway, those are
sure,
soccer
yeah,
clubs.
and also we can't quite repeat the past, but it does not mean we can't learn from the past as well.
Sure,
and the way I look at it, going forward, at least as a situation here in Canada, it's a good thing to look at the faith formation of young people. Maybe not in like a boarding school, but maybe in parishes. Like I'm director of youth ministry for the Peterborough Diocese, and the parish youth programs are very important for the faith development of young people. Also, which school they go to as well. Like I'm also chaplain of Our Lady of the Wayside Catholic School.
Okay.
It's a private Catholic school in Peterborough under the classical tradition. And basically how it works, classical education is a whole thing to describe there. But basically, Catholic classical education is aimed at
the closest
thing. Yes,
school,
for sure. Yeah, it's not a boarding school; kids don't live there, but the boys and girls are there. But
it's more Catholic than the Catholic system that we have here, and some even say that is once the government pays, the government establishes the rules.
For sure, yes, and we have the freedom to direct our curriculum and to aim at not just the academic formation of the kids, which is pretty good. Like you got kids in high school reading Divine Comedy, Dante.
Okay,
yes, you got that, and then you also aim at the spiritual formation, the personal formation of the young people. Like for example, we have daily mass at the school. And I go there for daily mass,
so
and
that's a
they're
seminary.
They're into it, yeah,
it's
kind of like that,
seminary.
yes, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And because then at older age, some kids, they are already brainwashed by the world. That it's very difficult unless they come to something like Paul. That you fall from your horse, unless they come to certain a crisis of that, or that you think about that. What's the meaning of all this? But very few do, and so. But this school would be the place, and it's good that you are the chaplain, so that you follow those kids even personally.
For sure, yes, and I see a lot of good things happening there. Like at the daily mass, they're all singing the entrance hymn, and they're all singing communion hymn and the concluding hymn, and kids do the readings, and it's they're paying attention, they're praying along, and a lot will come kneel for communion. As well, and most come for communion. It depends. So since it's early in the morning, sometimes they have to eat breakfast. And you don't want to kids fainting. So
but that's farming vocation
for sure. Yes,
from early on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and on Thursdays we have adoration. So each class comes for adoration in the chapel. And we have confessions, and I can be pretty busy with confessions. I look forward to when the grade 1-2s come because they're too young. But when they're in the chapel, I get a little bit of a break, and then all of a sudden the 3-4s come, and then I'm busy again. So because
at least I don't know in Peterborough, but when you go to parishes here in Toronto, well, young people, a parish that has a youth group is a very rare thing. And the families, you visit families. When I enter, I know if the family is practicing Catholic or not. When I enter the house and I don't see a picture of our Blessed Mother and the crucifix here and there, I see nothing, then forget about it. Because those are references that help you. You know, to have a picture, a crucifix on the wall, it helps you indirectly, and even unknowingly it helps you. But you see no reference, and you see other sorts of arts, then...
For sure. You also see it sometimes in the Catholic schools. Like there are good teachers in the public Catholic system, of course. That I know the director of education in the local school board is a very solid guy. He was my parishioner when I was in parish ministry as pastor. There are good people there, but once I walked into a classroom at a different school, and I looked around, there was no crucifix in the classroom. There were all sorts of other things, but no crucifix. And
so that's a public school. But why would I send my kids to a school that is called Catholic, but is exactly the same as the public?
For sure.
So so you are lucky to have that school. Somebody from that school already came here to somehow advertise this, because this system is coming up. The really Catholic schools, not the ones that belong to the Catholic school board. That some of them are not really Catholic, and they go all together with this gender, and they have to put up the flag, you know.
For sure, yeah.
So about your vocation, how did you come to know that God was calling you to the priesthood?
Okay, yeah. So I I was born and raised in Peterborough, and I'm from Sacred Heart Parish in Peterborough. So I was baptized there, had all my sacraments, set my priesthood ordination there. I grew up in a Catholic family. I'm the oldest of two boys, so my younger brother was born when I was 15 years old. So there's an age gap between us.
Yeah.
It's fine now, but it's, you know, when it first happens, it's kind of like different. You're a teenager by then, but we just grew up Catholic. And at my parish, as I was saying earlier, there were Polish Franciscans there, and I saw them around. There were a couple of them, so you got to see more than one priest. So the one who baptized me, he's deceased now. Otherwise, he'd be well into his 90s. There's a funny story with my baptism. It was in the 80s, so I won't say when I was born exactly, but in the 80s, my family was getting ready to have me baptized at the church, and back then the pastor did between masses. We had an English mass, a Polish mass, and then another English mass. So I think it was between like the English to Polish or Polish and English. I'm not sure. So we're waiting for my godmother and her sister to come out. In the 80s, women did hairspray, so their hairs were huge, and we're waiting and waiting for them to come out, and they must have killed like 3 bottles of hairspray that day. So and then we come out and we come to the church, and in the church apparently there was another child to be baptized, and so again, I'm a baby. I don't remember this. I'm told the story. Sure. yeah, and if I did, it'll be interesting. But so my family tells me they went to the church, and because we were late, the pastor had decided to baptize this other child, and he saw me, and I was like, oh, okay, you guys are here finally. Okay, or we'll just do it. So we did a quick ceremony, and apparently people were coming in for mass, and we had to do it very quickly. But he did it validly, so I asked about that. Of course, yeah. There's been some cases in U.S.
As long as you say, I baptized you in the name of the Father and the Son, that's valid.
Oh yes,
you can skip the rest. Yeah, so
for
good.
Sure,
so
yes,
and then, but that's your vocation doesn't come.
It did come from that, yes,
a bit more
for
like
sure,
mine.
for sure, yeah. So I grew up Catholic. I went to a public funded Catholic school until it closed down, and then I had my family had a choice. Either put me on a bus to another Catholic school in Peterborough, St. Peter's, which actually did close as well, but or send me to walk an extra half block to King Edward Public School. So we decided we don't want to not bother the busing option, just to send me to the public school. So I was the first time there with non-Catholic students. Like in the Catholic school, that most of them were still Catholic. At the public school, I was pretty much the only Catholic student there. Yeah. So you would tell my friends, we'll be talking and be saying, oh, what'd you do over the weekend? Oh, we did this and this and this. And I would say, oh, yeah, I went to church on Sunday. And they're like, church? What's that? What church? I asked, are you baptized? What's that? Wow. Yeah, they didn't even know anything about baptism. They had no...
Back at that time already?
Back at that time, 80s,
there were many
in the early 2000s, there were unbaptized kids starting to kind of pop around. Yeah, so that kind of made me a little self-aware of my faith and like, oh, this makes me unique. Not in a way that they didn't bully me about it. It's just thankfully didn't happen. But so I kind of got a little more curious into my faith, and I also was going going to high school, I thought, oh, we're going to go back to a Catholic high school, Holy Cross in Peterborough, and I'll learn more about the faith there, which I didn't directly at the school. I did more so through a parish youth group. And it was through youth ministry that I kind of started to kind of develop an idea of a vocation in my teen years. Like in those days, if you start thinking of vocation in your teens, doesn't mean you can go right away, of course, but it kind of planted the seed. So I was kind of on and off about priesthood, and being teen years, you can't make, you're very, it's a very up and down life, of course, and kind of also growing in your faith as well, and kind of also I was kind of like up and down. You'd be a little more fervent and a little more lukewarm than up and down, and then once I got to the end of high school, like by grade 12, long story short, as kids in grade 12,
it's when you have to decide.
You have to make a decide.
What are you going to
what are you going to do
life?
with life? Yeah. So I started to kind of have like a existential crisis. Like, where am I going? What should I do? What should I do? And thankfully, what happened at the time, I had a really good pastor assigned to the parish. Like the Franciscans had moved out and went to a different parish in Peterborough, and then a diocesan priest moved in, and he got to know me fairly well, and then I think he knew I was involved in youth ministry, and I may have told him that I was interested in priesthood, or at least I thought about priesthood. And so one day, it was probably like May or early June of my final grade 12 year. I was getting ready for graduation, and I wasn't sure what to do. I'd applied to school, but I wasn't sure did I want to do it or not. So he knew I was in this kind of crisis mode, and so he came to me and said, "Stephen, what are you doing next year?" And I said, "Father Ray, I'm not sure what I'm going to be doing next year. I'm thinking of going to school, but I'm not sure if I want to do that. I want to take an extra year at high school or take a year off at work and so on." Then he said, "Did you know at the rectory here, Veo is moving in with their discernment house. And in those days, the offices of vocation, evangelization, and youth were merged together into one director, Veo, V-E-Y-O. And it had moved into the rectory of Sacred Heart Parish. And one of the things they offered was a place for young men as they're considered priesthood. So if you could go to school and then basically be there, and it's kind of like
you live there.
You live there, yes. So
like my late years in high school were like that.
Oh, okay.
I would spend the day at school, even eat there. But then I was living in the seminary.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So we it was kind of a similar idea, but it was more like a discernment house. So I met with the vocations director at the time, now Monsignor Norbert Glassmacher, and I applied and just to live there, and I was doing some correspondence course with the University of Toronto.
Okay.
So I did a year through university, but I was doing it kind of at home, but living at this residence. Yeah. And I got to know like 4 other young guys who were there, 2 of whom are now priests of our diocese. And the other 2 have kind of moved on. One's married, and the other is, I'm not sure what he's doing. But of the 5, 3 of us are now priests of the diocese. Okay. Yeah. Good. So I was... that year, it was overall a good year, but still, you're still very young.
And that's like a pre-seminary.
Pre-seminary kind of thing, yes. So, like, it was clear we're not seminarians by then. We were just, discerning. But we got an opportunity to take part in a lot of the youth office's activities. We did morning watch, which is basically all-night adoration at a parish. And that was run by the youth themselves. So there was a group of youth called the Cork Team, Catholics on the Road for Christ. And think of like net ministries, but localized to the Peterborough Diocese. And we'll be going to parish once a month and basically leading all-night adoration of the Blessed Sacrament. So basically we start with the evening Mass. Father Norbert would expose the Blessed Sacrament. We'd be praying in the chapel, in the church, and then there'll be youth activities going on in the hall. And basically we'll all sign up for like an hour. I would do hours like in the evening, in the very early morning, in the middle of the night. Like I remember once I went to like 3 a.m. This was at a parish in Parry Sound, so St. Peter the Apostle in Parry Sound. And I thought, I'll just do it like at 3 a.m. So I walked in and I heard this beautiful singing. It was one of our youth who was singing like a Hosanna song. It's kind of like a praise and worship. Yeah. And just sitting there in the chapel was just so wonderful. So amazing to hear this and so invigorating. And I think the experience of adoration kind of helped me kind of discern vocation. Up to then, it was more like very propedeutic, just kind of preparing you in general terms.
Your patron saint, you know.
Saint Stephen, yes, yeah.
No, your patron saint, the of the priests.
Oh yeah, John Vianney, yes,
Saint
John Vianney, yes,
he was
yeah.
a very contemplative person.
For sure, and also reinvigorating my understanding of confession as well was really good. And I had a good spiritual director at the time, and I think he was very patient with me. I think he had directed really young guys before, so he knew, understand. It came to a point where I decided to do like a major confession, like a general confession, and and he said afterwards, that's a good confession, and I'm glad you did this, and just, talk about things. And to me, that was like a watershed moment. It's like, okay, this is the Lord's mercy. This is what a priest does, and have that experience of that. What was quite wonderful. It helped me discern as well. So at the end of that year, I was still thinking of priesthood. Still wasn't sure what to do exactly.
Yeah.
So the diocese sent. I asked, "Do you want to do a college level seminary? You'll get your degree, your philosophy degree at St. Philip's Seminary in Toronto, run by the Oratorian Fathers." So they said, okay, you can do that. I thought it was at first a 2-year program, then it got changed to a 3-year program. Then I went there, and then it's St. Philip's is it's seminary, but it's like college level seminary. It doesn't provide you like the ministries you need for priesthood. It's very preparatory, and so it's very like college. Like you're doing a degree there, but you're also with a bunch of other guys who are considering the priesthood. And so I studied there. I did my 3 years there. At the end of that, my time there, and in summers I had worked with the diocese. I got some part-time jobs working with the diocese here and there. Then at the end of that year, I was still in a state where I wasn't really ready to go to major seminary. Okay. So I took a year off, and that year was a really good year for me. I think I was still kind of in this, I keep using existential crisis, but something like, still not sure where you are.
Sometimes you have to get out of the forest so that you can see the forest from outside.
For sure, yes. So I did that. And basically, I found a place to live, and then I was working at a local grocery store. I started part-time, then became full-time. I found out that the owner was a Catholic man, Knights of Columbus, at the parish that I was living at. I was living at near St. Alphonsus Parish in Peterborough. Okay. And then my department manager was also a Catholic, Knights of Columbus from St. Anne's in the north end of Peterborough. I did not know this when I applied.
That's interesting.
Yeah, then I found that afterwards. But it was good to kind of get out of the forest and kind of get back in the world. And but I wasn't like away from church life. I was still going to mass. I was still helping out at St. Alphonsus Parish. I was still, I was talking to our vocations director. By then, we had switched to a different one, Father Craig Cruikshank, and so I was doing some discernment programs with him, and he would invite me to kind of go to if he was filling in at a parish, he would invite me to come along as well, because he was trying to do a discernment program as well. So in that year, I was able to discern that, yes, to live as a good Catholic man is a good thing. I enjoyed this, but I still felt that tug towards priesthood. I still feel that this was not enough. I need more of this. And also I found that, when I entered the oratory, I was a little young, maybe a little too young at 19. And then so I think because I'm a little bit older now, I can have a better understanding of what the vocation entails. So I entered St. Augustine's in 2012. I was about 23 years old. Yeah. Did their spiritual year, and then 4 years of theology and 1 year of internship. So as I was saying earlier, I was on internship in Bowmanville at St. Joseph's Parish under Father Paul Massel, the pastor, who used to be an opera singer. Oh. Yeah, he sang in the opera. He sang in the Phantom of the Opera.
Oh, the Phantom of the Opera.
Yeah, he played Andre.
Oh.
Andre. So he always had stories, and a very musical man, and a very kind man, a very pastoral man as well. Yeah, I learned a lot about being a parish priest from him.
Okay, I've just one more question before we end the interview. And it happened to me. At one time I was also looking for vocations for our religious order, for missionary, for the missions. And when you come to a young man, the question is, well, it's all good, the priesthood, and it's all good, but then you don't marry. You cannot marry. So how would you speak to the people? What is it? Marriage is the way I look at it, is the default vocation.
For sure.
That's the default vocation, which is close to any other living beings that they get together for reproduction. So marriage is our default vocation, although sometimes some people, they say, well, it's a vocation. Yeah, well, but the default one.
Yes, yeah.
That's the default one. If you don't, and if certainly you have to justify to put marriage aside, to put the default vocation aside. You really have to come up with something that justifies it. So how would you justify to a young man that to put aside the default vocation to which we are all called and follow this other path?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, we fall into the pitfall and we have to avoid of thinking of celibacy as only a sacrifice, that you're sacrificing a wife and kids for
so only the negative thing.
Yes, the negative thing. But we have to think of it in the positive sense as well, that we're really not living a life of less love. We're actually aiming at a life of more love. In fact, we're actually trying to love more in celibacy, whereas in married life, you give yourself completely to your wife and your children. They're these particular people, and you give yourself totally to them. That's beautiful. That's wonderful. Like that's when I see couples who are living that, that's a wonderful thing to see.
Yeah.
And that's attractive, and that's a good thing. So I tell guys, if you like that, that's good. Doesn't mean you're necessarily called to the marriage, but it's a good thing as human beings. When we see something that's good and beautiful, we're attracted to that. But we also have to remember that in priesthood, we may give up a particular family, but we're also expressing universal fatherhood. We're a father for everyone.
That's why we are called fathers.
We're called fathers,
not reverends.
Not reverends. Yes, we're called fathers because we're fathers to the people, and it's it's a selfless fatherhood where we empty ourselves so that we can give ourselves to others. And it's about maximizing your love, maximizing your heart. It's about loving more, not loving less. And even when you speak of marriage, even in a way, you're not really giving up marriage. You're actually taking on marriage. You're marrying the church. You're taking the church as your spouse, as Christ did. Read St. Paul's epistles. He says, Christ loved the church, his bride. Yeah. And same as priests, we love the church as our bride. And I'm aware in the Eastern Church, it's diocesan clergy can be married, but celibacy is also practiced amongst their monastics. Sure, So it's there as well. But for us,
in the Eastern Church, those who supposedly later on become bishops, they are all unmarried.
You're all unmarried, yes. Yeah. So the practice of celibacy is there as well. Too. Yeah. So it's we have to remember that celibacy is all about universal fatherhood. It's about marrying the church and loving more and marrying more. You marry the church and you give yourself to that. That's why I see priests sometimes wear a wedding band because we're married to the church. Yeah. Well, the collar we wear is supposed to function as
our
wedding ring. Yes, in a way. So
and what I would add to that, because I studied a lot about I graduated in moral theology and did my thesis on Freud, especially a small book that is called the Civilization and its Discontentments, and where Freud says that St. Francis lived Eros more than anybody else because he got in love with the whole creation. So, and I would say to this young man, look, sex is not an individual need. It's just a need of the species. But the species, so to say, God puts it in all individuals that at least some will use it for reproduction. But it's not an individual need. That means that you can, what it's a need is to love and be loved. That's the need.
For sure, yes.
But sex is not a need.
Exactly, yeah. So there's a human desire to love and to be loved in return.
That's a need.
That's the need. That's the need, yes. And I think a lot of people, young and old, can mistake that.
Mistake sex for love.
For sure, yes, yeah. But really, it's there to prolong the human.
And sex is human. It's fully human if it expresses love.
Oh, for sure, yes.
As when it doesn't, then it's degrading.
For sure, yeah, and that's why the sex within marriage is important because you need to since the person gives himself totally, you need to socially give yourself to that other person by bonding yourself
even
to
physically,
them physically. Yes, so it's But we remember love and physical intimacy are not always the same. But a lot of people mistake that, and we see and as a priest, I've seen the results of that, and it's not pretty. A lot of heartbreak, a lot of hurt feelings, and a lot of people are just unhappy, especially get into later life when those passions start to die off as people get older. Not really die off completely, but they get less prominent. And
the thing is that the young men, they come up probably to know what we are speaking about at later.
For sure.
When they've been already hurt and badly hurt, then they come to know the truth and the reality.
For sure, yeah. And to kind of conclude on this topic, to speak of celibacy, basically when I was telling the young guys, I would say, here's what the church teaches. But how about you try it out? Like when you enter the seminary, you don't discern to apply. You apply to discern. You live the life of celibacy in seminary formation as a way of trying it out. Yeah. And if you find that you still want a wife and kids, you just go in that direction.
Yeah,
but
sure.
You can't make a proper decision unless you know what you're choosing.
You try this out and see that it is possible, that you can do it. Then it's your call.
Definitely.
Thank you, Father
Most
Stephen.
welcome, Father.
So for this nice interview, and I know that you have an event. Could you say something about this event? And
for sure. So on Saturday, May 18th at Santa Cruz Parish here in Toronto, I'll be joining the Sisters of the Poor of Jesus Christ on a Vocations event. So the Vocations event starting at 9 a.m. and ending at 4 p.m. It's joining the sisters as they do a street ministry serving the poor in downtown Toronto. And I'm bringing some people from the Peterborough Diocese as well. And this is designed to give people a taste of vocations and of religious life specifically. Because it's one thing to think about vocations, another thing to actually try it out. And do give it a try out. It's open for guys and girls. 18 plus, because you're dealing with the homeless and could be drug addiction issues, mental health issues, and lunch will be provided, so you'll be fed, and there'll be a time for mass and adoration as well. I'll be giving a talk on vocations. Yeah, and the Sisters, the Poor of Jesus Christ, they're a Hamilton-based community. Well, I think they're founded in Brazil, but they have a house in Hamilton. So it's like a tri-diocese kind of meeting together for this. You have to realize, in our church, we can't be, partisan and say, oh, you're in your diocese, I'm in my diocese. We're Catholic. We're all Catholic, we're all universal. I learned that at World Youth Day. I went to World Youth Day, this past one in Lisbon, Portugal, and there were Catholics from all over the world there, all waving our flags. But
I think just one country was not there. I don't know which one, but I am Portuguese, so when I went there, I felt there was only one country that was not represented here. So that was really a Catholic event.
For sure, yeah. And I know the Sisters, Poor of Jesus Christ. I met them before. Well, they were doing the interview just before me, and they run a street ministry in downtown Hamilton every other Friday. So if you want more information, if anyone wants more information, you can contact the sisters, and they'll let you know.
Thank you, Father.
You're most welcome, Father.
See you around.
Take care.